Welcome to the debut episode of After School with Mr. Van Huss. I've been very lucky and blessed in my life to cross paths with a lot of very interesting people. And I'm going to be having some conversations with those people and talking to them about their education and how they found their success. Now, I really started this web series for two reasons. Number one is teachers. Teachers, if you've been doing this for any amount of time, you know you have the great honor and privilege of possibly having a pretty major impact on somebody's life. Hopefully, throughout these conversations, you will hear some teachers' names mentioned that were very influential to the people I'm going to be talking to. Second reason, students. All these people I'm going to be having conversations with, they've all been right where you are. So I hope you listen to the advice that they're going to give you. My very first guest is Chris Condon, who writes That Texas Blood for Image Comics. He's also done some work with DC and Marvel. I think you're going to really enjoy what he has to say. Welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss. Chris, so happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, for those that may be watching that may not be familiar with your work, can you tell everybody what it is that you do?
So my name is Chris Condon. I am the writer of a comic book series from Image Comics called That Texas Blood, and we also have a spin-off mini series called The Enfield Gang Massacre. We've also, my artist and myself have also we've also done a Harley Quinn story. I've had a story at Marvel with for Crypt of Shadows, which is an Elsa Bloodstone story. And I've also had a one shot at Aftershock, which was an oversized one shot. It was a wrestling noir story. So you know, my genre I tend to work in is sort of darker crime stuff, but it's all part of the creative game. You sort of you bounce around from thing to thing. So, but that's what I do. I write.
And it's all excellent. For people that haven't read it, please go out and check it out. I think I've read about everything you put out so far. I know I've got Crypt of Shadows on my pull list in my local comic shop for a few weeks when it comes out. So it's all great. So what influenced you to do what you do? What made you want to be a writer?
Well, it's funny. I think that the thing that so I'd always kind of written. I don't really know. I don't really think about it as a career path necessarily. It was the same thing with I used to draw a lot, and I don't think I ever thought of it necessarily as a career. My uncle was a painter, a fine art painter. He never really had a huge amount of success, but within his circle, he was quite successful, and I mean he made a living doing it. And I always kind of thought that was really cool because I always loved artwork, was always loved drawing, so that was always in the back of my mind. I kind of always thought to myself I'd be an artist, like that was what I would do. But I was always writing. I remember I wrote like a book when I was a kid. At my local library, they had a sort of event that it was like over a week or something that you could create your own book, and I drew and wrote it. So it was a comic book. It was an illustrated book at least. And I actually went back to the library to see if they still had it, and they have like other people's that were in that year with me, but mine is missing. I don't know if maybe somebody liked it too much and they stole it. I don't know. But that was one of the first things. And then I wrote a book of, I grew up in the 90s and the Titanic was very very ever present because of the huge James Cameron film. And I wrote a book about the Titanic, and I just went to FedEx Kinko's and made copies of my book. So I had a few copies that I was passing around to friends and stuff on the schoolyard. But yeah, I don't know. But it was, I think I first realized that it was something that I was good at, and something that I enjoyed and wanted to pursue in high school. Actually, it was a teacher of mine named Miss Harmon, who, it's funny because I feel like we had our battles, me and Miss Harmon. I liked to kid around a lot. And she didn't necessarily like that I would kid around so much. But she really did nurture my my skills in writing. We would do picture prompts in school, and one of the after one of the picture prompts that I had written, she asked me to stay after class, and she asked me if I had ever thought of taking creative writing. And that was one of the first times that anybody kind of showed an interest in my work, outside of just, oh, this is pretty good, but actually, was kind of pointing me towards maybe you should pursue this in some larger way. So I kind of have her to thank for it.
Are you still in touch with Miss Harmon today?
I wish I was. I should probably try to get in touch with her. I've mentioned her previously in an interview, but I should probably try to get in touch with her and just say thank you. Because I really do. I mean, I'm looking back at, when you do this as a living and you're, fortunate enough to get paid to write, it's a great privilege and it's an honor to be able to do it. But, you sort of start thinking about like, where did it all come from? Where did it all start? And again, it was always kind of there, but I think really it was that moment where I realized like, oh, maybe I should pursue this. And in doing that, I mean, I ended up meeting a friend that I'm still very close with. He's also a writer and musician, and he's living out in LA now. It's funny that it all kind of started with this little, nut, way at the beginning.
Let me ask you a side question. What brought you and Jacob Phillips together? Because I know you guys have been frequent work partners. You done that Texas Blood and the Enfield Gang Massacre. And I think he was the artist on the Harley Quinn story, correct?
He was, yes.
So what brought you guys together?
What brought us together was, so I had been reading his father's a prominent comic book artist. His name is Sean Phillips. He works with a writer named Ed Brubaker. They're sort of known as like the team in comics for crime noir. Their books are, whenever they come out, they're a big event. And anyway, they were doing a book called Kill or Be Killed at the time. Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips. And in the backups of those issues, they would have an essay by, I believe it was by, I'm going to forget her name, but Kim something, I forget her last name. Anyway, she was doing essays about film noir, sort of analogous to what was in the comic, but more so just, noir films that you might not have seen otherwise. And Jacob was doing the illustrations for those. So they'd have an illustration of something from the movie, and then they'd have, this essay about the movie. And I enjoyed the essays, but I also really enjoyed that artwork. And I was trying to get a film made at the time of what would eventually become that Texas Blood. And I was looking at that work and I was thinking that would be great concept art for a film. And, because that was always kind of the thing that I was always struggling with, was how do I get money to do these things that I want to do? And I thought, well, it's hard to get money for a short film because, you're basically asking people to give you money for, based on nothing. You're promising I can make a short film, but you don't really have anything to show for it aside from your talent. They're not going to make their money back. So I thought if we showed a visual aid to folks to be like, hey, this is what it's going to look like, that might help them to see the vision and understand the vision more than just a black and white page. So that's how I got involved with Jake. Was I reached out to him on DeviantArt where he had his artwork, and I just cold emailed him and I said, hey, I have this script for a short film I'm trying to do, which would eventually become the first issue of that Texas Blood. And but I said, I'm trying to do this thing, and I don't really have any money, but I have this much that I can offer, and if you're interested, if you like the script, maybe you'll want to do it. And he read the script, said he loved the script, and he said, I'll do it. So he did 5 pieces for me, and that was in 2017. And then nothing happened. And then finally, I think in end of 2018, I was frustrated not having this thing getting made. So I just reached out to Jake again. I remember it was December 2018. It was December 2018 because I was working at a job that I hated. and I just emailed him and I said, hey, do you want to try to do this as a comic book? Neither of us have a comic. And I had been thinking about doing other things as comics, drawing myself, which was, an interesting idea. But I asked Jake if he wanted to do it with me, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. So we hammered out a deal where we would do a pitch. I'd pay him X amount of dollars to do this pitch. And by the end of January, I think we had the pitch finished. I think it was 8 to 10 pages, something like that. And that's how we started working together. And, it started as like a purely professional relationship. We didn't really talk much outside of emails and all that. But at this point, we talk every day. He's on vacation right now and he's sending me pictures from the vacation. We stay in touch. He's one of my good friends, actually, I would say. And I think he would say the same thing about me. So it's grown into an actual relationship.
That's excellent. So before you got into writing comics, who were some of your heroes? Like, who did you want to be like when you first got into it?
Ooh, I mean, one of my all-time favorite, I always loved the work of Paul Dini and Bruce Timm and Batman the Animated Series, and then the spin-offs that they would do. So, and I just mentioned this recently in a video I did for our Harley Quinn story. Mad Love was a big one for me. I also loved the miniseries that they did for, they would do like a holiday special, stuff like that. Darwin Cook was a huge influence on me. New Frontier was a book that I would pass around from person to person in high school. I bought the Absolute edition with like the little money that I had. I bought it's a big hardcover. And I passed that around from person to person. And I loved the writing. I loved the art. I just thought it was such a stylistic, just like genius thing. And then got into his Parker books. And obviously Alan Moore and Brew Baker, all these guys were, very influential to me in kind of setting the tone of what I think, my writing would eventually become, especially in comics. I mean, there were also other influences, of course, the Coen brothers in film and TV. Mad Men was big for me when that was on. And in books, I mean, Jim Thompson is a huge influence on everything I do. He's got that sort of Coen brothers cadence to how he writes his characters. And I like to think that there's a lot of that in what I do. So the influences are varied and they're many, but it all finds a way. I always tell people to just read and watch and just absorb as much as you can, because that's I just the other day I literally watched like 6 or 7 movies in a row, and just I was working the entire time, but I was just like I had these movies on. And some of them weren't great, but it doesn't matter if they're not great because you're still getting some. And even if it's not great and you see something that's not working, you might think to yourself, "Ooh, that didn't work. Why didn't that work?" So I think it's important to have many influences, even ones that you would not consider to be great.
So what was high school like for you, and what further education did you do?
Yeah. So high school was. I feel like high school tends to be a tumultuous time for many people. I think that I was definitely, I was a teenager. I was definitely going through that whole thing. I would be sad and then I would be happy, so it's like I was like a little bit all over the place. But I think I started off high school sort of very much absorbed in my own stuff, very, very much, wanting to just like tell my stories and do my thing that I was doing and didn't really care about the schoolwork. And I realized at a certain point that, oh, wait, I have to go to college and I have to do well. And so I turned myself around sophomore year, at tail end of freshman year and sophomore year. I really turned myself around and committed myself to my studies and did well. And senior year of high school, I was senior class president of my high school. I ran a tough race the previous year against a friend of mine. I remember he posted a poster, a cute dog, and on the poster it said Chris Condon hates puppies. But I squashed that rumor. I squashed that rumor, and there was no basis to it. It was all lies. But yeah, now high school was a great time, and I really, like I said, before about Miss Harmon specifically, and I got into creative writing in school, and really, I found my voice, I think, in high school. And just it's the experience of high school. I think that's very important. I mean, a lot of teachers that were very influential to me, and the friends that I made. And I didn't really prescribe to the clique sort of idea. I wasn't a part of one clique. I bounced around from different group to different group to different group, and I enjoyed that. And that's something that I think is good to have in your life, is to not just corner yourself, and to have, again, it's sort of like, in terms of like influences, if you have like if you have a varied friend group, I think that's better for you as an individual as well. So, high school was great in terms of that, and just sort of exploring myself and like what I liked, what I did, and just kind of figuring myself out. And, I remember specifically one time I was late to the football game, and like my friends were like, "Where were you?" I was like, "Oh, I was watching Pinocchio." And they were like, "You were watching Pinocchio?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a great film." And I like talking about the animation, and it's like this amazing motion picture that people, sort of think about as like a child's movie, but it's there, there's art to it. And that's what I was very much, I knew where my allegiances lay anyway, even then. But nothing wrong with Tennessee Titans football.
Very hard being a
But
fan. I keep the flag up, but it gets harder and harder every year, I think.
but yeah, and then I first went to I went to county college out of high school. I was originally going to go to a different university, and it went to orientation, and I wasn't feeling it, so I ended up going to county college. And I actually feel like the county college education that I got was the best education I got until later in my life. So, and I think that that's something that a lot of people might feel is, they might feel ashamed, to be going to like a something that's not a huge university, not Brown University, or, one of these, big universities with a big football team. But I really found that, it was a great transition from high school to college. And I really, there's some things that I learned, in those classes that I took that I'm still carrying with me today. I mean, there's a story that I want to tell whether it's a graphic novel or a novel, I don't know, but there's a story that I learned there, that I still am carrying with me and would love to do someday. And that again, like everything kind of influences it. But yeah, I went to county college, then I transferred over to a university in California called Woodbury University. I went for film, but I wasn't loving it, so I ended up dropping out, and I ended up finishing later on, in my late 20s at once I moved back to New Jersey, a place called Montclair State University, which, again, I transferred over to do film and TV, but found that I wasn't really enjoying the classes, and ended up doing an English degree, studying English. And I ended up finding that was the place for me. I loved every class that I took. I loved the difficulty of it. I loved exploring literature, and writing essays, and sort of exploring, exploring, there was also, societal issues that we would talk about, and things like, that was, to me, the best education that I had was later on in my life. I don't necessarily recommend that path to people. My thing was, I knew I wanted to go back to school at some point, and I sort of just put it off, but I ended up finishing, and I'm glad I did. And that's something that, a lot of times I'll be talking to young people, and they'll sort of be like wishy-washy about whether they want to go to school or not. And I just think that it was one of the great things that I did in my life was going back to school and studying. And it's something that I still carry with, and I still talk to my professors. We get lunch every so often. I go back and I'll do a talk at the school too about, writing, breaking into comics, what comics mean. Because it's something that I think a lot of people sort of think of comics. They think of, superheroes, kid stuff. And they are that, but there's also a whole lot more to comics. And that's something I like to talk about. Because I want people to take it seriously, because it is a very, it's a viable medium, that I don't think people talk about enough.
Well, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying because I, straight out of college, I had a job in the music business.
Hmm.
And I found I wasn't always happy there. One thing led to another, and I didn't decide I wanted to be a teacher until I was 30. And then
Yeah.
I went back and got my master's in education. So I totally get the winding path to get to where you're going. And it's totally okay to do that. And I try to tell my students that all the time. You know,
Yeah.
you don't always have to have it figured out when you're 18 years old. Now,
I think that's the thing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're sort of pushed to, have things figured out. What are you going to study? What's going to be your concentration in college? And I think that sort of does a disservice to you as an individual, is to sort of be like, you're choosing what you want, unless you know what you want to do, which is fair. But for me, my life is built on pivots. I'm heading one way and it's not working, so I'll pivot and go another way. And that, I think that's an important thing to have in the back of your mind, is if something's not working, how do I make it work? How do I figure this out? And that was a big part of my life and my choices. And at this point, I'm pretty happy with my choices.
awesome. So I got one more question for you. Hopefully there's going to be a number of teenagers watching this, both high school and probably a few college students also. What is one piece of advice that you would pass on to them? And you already said some good advice. We'll get one more.
Yeah. My advice would be I think you might be annoyed by the amount of work that you have to do in school. And you might not want to be doing your homework. You might want to be spending your time doing other things, but at the end of the day, I think that it's important to do that stuff. I think that you learn a lot, and I think that it really does help you in becoming a better individual, a more educated individual. I think that that's very important, and I think that it helps you in your later life as well, and when getting your work done and focusing on your work and all that. So I do think that that's important. I know that I definitely got annoyed at the amount of work that I had to do at times, but I do think that, there's a reason for it. It's not just because your teachers want to, torture you. It's not that. They're trying to help you learn, and they're trying to help you grow as an individual. And sometimes it's hard to see that when you're that age, that's what they're doing. And that's the purpose of this. It's not to, put you in a room and, torture you for 8 hours. It's to help you grow and to educate you and to, help grow your mind and what you're thinking. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to say it exactly, but that's it. But in terms of, like, if people are out there and they want to be a writer, if they want to be an artist, something like that, if they want to, anything they want to do, really, my advice for that is just to keep doing the work. Just keep working at it. And, it didn't happen overnight for me. I was trying to write and get stuff made throughout my 20s, and I didn't have success until I was 28, so it's a long road, and sometimes it can feel like it's futile. But if you just keep pushing, if you believe in yourself and the work, I think that's all that matters. And eventually, if the work is good, somebody will notice. And so if you just keep doing it, keep pounding the pavement, it will eventually happen. That's my advice.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you talking to me here today. And thanks for just, sharing some of your story and sharing some of your life. I can't wait to see how the Enfield Gang Massacre ends up, because both issues so far have just left me hanging, whereas I got to see what happens here. So
Yeah.
I love your writing, and I am, I'll be buying anything you put out probably. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And thanks for being on After School with Mr. Van Huss.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good one, Chris.
Thank you.